Good evening. My name is John H., and I'm an alcoholic. In this Code Blue Big Book Action Seminar, we're going to go through the recovery section of the Big Book line by line. We are going to take the action that our founders and the first 100 people who recovered say that we must do to overcome this seemingly hopeless condition of mind and body. Now, I don't claim to be any kind of a big book and 12-step guru or expert, not by any means. I am no kind of deep spiritual advisor. I'm just a simple drunk who was almost dead from the disease when a couple of recovered alcoholics reached out their hand to me and said, "We have a different way." Now, this is based on the Canadian method pioneered by the Golden Slippers, but I also borrow heavily from the Joe and Charlie Big Book Weekend tapes, from Chuck C., from Clancy, and from all of the giants upon whose shoulders we are riding. Now, I would love it if you could grab a couple of friends and listen to these sessions together, because working the steps with other people is always more powerful than trying to go through them alone. So you're going to need a large print big book, a highlighter, and a pen, and some willingness. And as you guys will see, we open every session with a set-aside prayer to more open our mind to be more receptive to this information. Thank you so much for listening. Good evening, I'm John, I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, John.
Hey, John. During the 1950s, a man by the name of Max C., now deceased, started a group in Winnipeg, Manitoba called the Golden Slippers. The group was the back to the basics of the big book kind of group, especially for those people who could not stay sober for any length of time. The group took a bunch of chronic slippers and walked them through the steps, taking the action exactly as laid out by the first 100 men and women who wrote the basic textbook Alcoholics Anonymous. This is not your typical thanks for sharing kind of AA meeting, nor is it like any seminar. Participants are asked to do all 12 steps as laid out in our basic textbook. One or more of the people who have done this work before will be guides to lead you through the instructions in our basic textbook using a dictionary published at about the same time as the book Alcoholics Anonymous to help us better understand the directions as they were written by the first 100 men and women. We ask every participant to commit to the entire process. Though we read and study the AA Big Book, this group is not limited to members of AA. We who have participated in these groups before have come to understand that these sessions make us much better sponsors. We can now lead people through the steps exactly as given to us by those who have gone before, unfettered and unchanged. In addition to being a boot camp for sponsors, we also feel this is especially valuable to those who have been through some sort of treatment or rehab and have been, in effect, left off at 3 or 5. Recovery requires that we do all 12 steps. We recover in AA by taking the steps, and if we don't take the action as described in our basic textbook, we might not recover. These study and action sessions will guide you through the steps precisely as the first 100 men and women laid them down. These are back to the basic sessions, accepting the simple kit of spiritual tools that's then laid at our feet. Let's open up with a set-aside prayer. God, please let me set aside everything I think I know about sobriety, life, and you, so that I may be open to a new experience. Peace. All right, guys, welcome, man. I had quite a challenging day at work. I'm exhausted here, so bear with me if I lose my place a few times. We ended last week with the promises, right? So what the book tells us is going to happen is if we are painstaking about this phase of our development, right, we're going to be amazed before we're halfway through. And I think they're talking about the amends phase, but it's also talking about steps 4 through 9. And that's where these promises, that's where most people get the promises. And I remember for years, you know, I would always go to treatment, I'd get out of treatment, I'd go to meetings for 2 or 3 months, stay sober, and I'd always get angry when somebody read those promises, because I'd say, they're not coming true for me. They've never come true for me. I don't believe these people. This is BS, right? And I didn't understand that I had to do the work in the book, and I had to go out and help other people in order for the promises to come true in my life. You know, thank goodness that's something that I discovered firsthand this last time, which hopefully will be the last time that I ever end up in detoxes about 6 years ago. We're now on step 10, and You know, again, are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them. You know, and I'm kind of a big advocate because this last time I was ready to drink myself to death again, and I'm glad that somebody walked me through these steps rather quickly because once I started doing the work, my spiritual awakening happened actually rather quickly. In about 3 months, my obsession to drink was lifted out of me, and so were a lot of my anger, my resentment, and a lot of my fear. And I really did start to experience these promises. So what I've only been sober for 6 years, and so I rely a lot on the writings of other people, of the giants that have gone before me, and of speakers. And I just hear all kinds of stories about people that, you know, have gone through and they've done the work and they experience these promises. And they think, my God, this is just so wonderful. I've done it. I have arrived. This is just the greatest thing on earth, right? And then what these people do is, they're key to the houseworks now, and they're probably back in the bedroom. Maybe they've got a new job. Maybe they've got a new TV. Maybe they put some new carpeting down. Maybe they bought a new truck. Right? And maybe, hey, you know what, man, I better work a few extra hours at work to pay for this. And, all of a sudden these people start to cut back on their meetings, and they start to cut back on the things that got them to this point. And, our book tells us that if you're a real alcoholic and you start to do that you're going to be in trouble, right? That you're going to be in trouble. And in my limited experience over the last 6 years, I have seen people do this. I have seen people go back out. I've seen people contemplate suicide when they're sober because they stop doing these activities. So our book tells us that we've got to keep going, right? We've got to keep going. So we're in the middle of page 84. Right after, they will always materialize if we work for them. This thought brings us to step 10. Before I do that, can somebody with better eyesight than me read the 10th tradition up there? The 10th tradition. Can somebody read that?
Alcoholics Anonymous says no opinion on the outside issues, hence the AA name ought never be drawn into public controversy.
Okay, so we've got no opinion on outside issues, thus the AA name never be drawn into public controversy. Let's see here, I'm supposed to read Problems Other Than Alcohol. This was a pamphlet that was written by Bill Wilson. If you don't have it, it's a good one. He talks about, how do we deal with people who are drug addicts that come into AA and things of that nature. But there's one phrase in here, it says sobriety. Freedom from alcohol through the teaching and practice of the 12 steps is the sole purpose of an AA group. Groups have repeatedly tried other activities and they have always failed. Okay, so if I don't work the steps and live by the principles of this program, there's a good possibility that I'll drink again, and then if I drink again, there's a good possibility that I'll die. Now, if the fellowship, and I know we haven't really studied the traditions in this Code Blue at all, but if the fellowship does not live by the traditions and follow the traditions, perhaps AA will fail. Now, if AA fails, then maybe we're all going to drink and perhaps we're all going to die. So these traditions are quite important. It makes me wonder, what's more important, the steps or the traditions? I think that we have to really remember that they're both vital to our sobriety and to our life. There was a group called the Washingtonians. They sprung up around Washington, D.C. in the mid-1840s. And what the Washingtonians were, they reached about 200,000 sober members. The Washingtonians were one alcoholic helping another alcoholic, very similar to what we do in AA. Right? Now you got to remember, in the 1840s, there were no phones, there was no internet, and there was no means of mass communication other than newspapers. And yeah, my goodness, one alcoholic helping another. That's only the second time in 7,000 years of recorded history where there was successful rehabilitation of chronic alcoholics in such large numbers. Right? Now the Washingtonians, they reached about 200,000 members. And guess what they did? They said, we're so good at going around and helping other people get sober, I bet we can do other things, right? At that time, there was an election going on, much like the one that ripped our country apart not too long ago, right? There was an election, and they got involved in that election. They said, hey, you know what? We probably can stop the selling of booze. So they tried to stop the selling of booze. And they also got involved in religion. Right? So fast forward a year later, the Washingtonians went from 200,000 people down to nothing. And most of the members of the Washingtonians died drunk. Right? The only reason we know about them is because there were a few people that lived and wrote about it. Right? So we got to remember that these traditions are put in place for a reason. And Bill Wilson saw this happening to AA. He saw groups falling apart and disintegrating, and somebody wrote him a letter and said, it's just like the Washingtonians, and he had no idea who they were, so he went to the Library of Congress and researched them. And that's when he said, my gosh, I had better write these traditions, otherwise the fellowship might fail. So I think it's very important that we, that we look at those traditions as well. Okay, so middle of the page, 84. This thought brings us to step 10. Okay, we're going to highlight the next 4 lines, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory and continue to set right any mistakes as we go along. We vigorously commence this way of living as we cleaned up the past. You can stop highlighting there. Off to the left, let's write remain teachable. Remain teachable. Because we're doing things vastly different than we used to do in our lives, and we're looking at things, right? And we've got to remain teachable. We've got to keep that same open-minded philosophy. We have entered the world of the Spirit, right? That means we've actually had a spiritual awakening. Our next function is to grow, not maintain, right? People think that step 10 and 11 are maintenance steps. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness, right? Not maintain. We're going to highlight to the end of the paragraph. This is not an overnight matter. It should continue for our lifetime. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. When these crop up, we ask God at once to remove them. We discuss them with someone immediately and make amends quickly if we have harmed anyone. Then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Love and tolerance of others is our code. You can stop highlighting there, and next to love and tolerance of others is our code, you can write Code Blue. That's where I was told the name of Code Blue came from. Right? We come in here, we're wheeled in here on a gurney, we're almost dying, and we walk out of here with a new attitude about how our main purpose is now to help other people. So we're going to go back where we started highlighting. This is not an overnight matter. It should continue for our lifetime. So right next to those, what we just highlighted, write step 10 instructions off to the left, step 10 instructions. And we're going to take a little closer look at these instructions. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. Okay, above that, write step 4. We did exactly that in step 4. Okay? When, even though you highlighted it, circle when, and next to it write not if. Bill is telling us that we're humans. Doggone it, we're humans, and these things are going to crop up. The selfishness, the dishonesty, the resentment, and fear, they're going to crop up. Right? I'm a commission salesman. These things crop up almost every day for me. When these crop up, we ask God at once to remove them. Above that, write step 6 and 7. 6 and 7. I kind of made up a little prayer in my early sobriety, which is, God, I'm not spiritually fit right now. Please help me out. Because I go crazy sometimes. It's usually always at work. We discuss them with someone immediately. Above that, write step 5. Step 5, right there. And make amends quickly if we've harmed anyone. Above that, write steps 8 and 9. So basically, Bill's telling us that we're going to work steps 4 through 9 on a daily basis. Then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help, right? Step 12 above that. Love and tolerance of others is our code, right? So once again, we're reworking steps 4 through 9 on a daily basis. And I'll give you, if we have time, I'll give you some definite examples on how I do that. And we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol, for by this time sanity will have returned. Okay, so circle the word sanity, and next to that you can write 10th step promise. You remember step 2? Well, we get our sanity back on page 84. Right? After the spiritual awakening, we get our sanity back. And that's like Bill, man, when he was in that hotel and he saw the bar on one side and he heard the tinkling of glasses and the smoke, and he was just about to walk in there. He said, oh my God, if I go in there, I'm going to get drunk and it'll all be over, right? Because his sanity was returned and he saw it for what it was. You know, he still has to do certain things, but at least he can see the truth a little bit more easily. Sanity will have returned. We will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. So those are all 10-step promises right there, that whole last thing. And we can write miracle next to that, particularly next to we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. I mean, if you guys remember how you come into these rooms and you're fighting the obsession to drink on a daily basis and you're fighting it horribly and you're losing, right? Well, now we're not fighting that anymore, right? And we're not fighting with other people, right? We're not getting angry about every little thing that happens. We're not reliving these old hurts. It's an absolute miracle. We react sanely and normally, and we will find that this has happened automatically. We will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That is the miracle of it. We are not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. Right? If I have no problem, I mean, when I'm at family get-togethers, by all means, drink the wine, have the beer. If I've got to go into a bar to pull somebody out of there, I mean, I don't even think about drinking, right? I like to say that God has separated me from alcohol, right? It's nothing that I did, right? I just don't have it anymore. I don't obsess about it. Highlight the next sentence. We feel as though we had been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. Just that little line there. And these are more promises. You can write more promises, more 10-step promises. We have not even sworn off. I used to swear off, right? When I wasn't practicing these steps, I'm never going to drink again. Or at least I won't drink for a week, right? I had to make a big shebang about it. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We are neither cocky nor are we afraid. That is our experience. Underline this next sentence. That is how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. Fit spiritual condition. So, off to the left, or let's write, how do I know if I'm not spiritually fit? How do I know if I'm not, or somewhere in there, how do I know if I'm not spiritually fit? Right? And I think that's a question we can each answer for ourselves. But for me, it's when I start to act like I used to when I was in active addiction. Right? And again, that's when my selfishness, my dishonesty, my resentment and fear starts to run my life again. When that happens, I know that something's wrong, man. What is going on, John? So how do I know if I'm not spiritually fit? Let's go ahead and just highlight 1, 2, 3, 4. Highlight the next 5 lines. I'll let you get that done. And then we're also going to need a pen because we're going to circle a few things. It is easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. Okay, so draw a little arrow off to the left by the word laurels. We're going to define laurels. Things I've done, accomplishments I've achieved, past tense. So that's laurels. Things I've done, accomplishments I've achieved, and you can even say good things I've done, I guess. Good things I've done, accomplishments I've achieved, past tense. Past tense. We are headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. Circle subtle foe, those two words, and we're going to give you a definition of subtle foe. Subtle foe is sly, clever, devious, difficult to detect. That's what subtle means. Sly, clever, devious, difficult to detect. And foe means personal enemy. Personal enemy. So alcohol is sly, clever, devious, difficult to detect, and it's our personal enemy. It wants to kill us. It wants to kill us. Right? So if we rest on things we've done, so we've done the 9 steps and things are going pretty good, and we're gonna stick with that. We're headed for trouble right here because alcohol is going to come and it's going to get us. We are not cured of alcoholism. This should still be highlighted. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Okay, so next to that, let's write postponement of death sentence. Postponement of death sentence. You know, I think it was the second time I was going through this, the Code Blue, and I read that, I just had a little picture in my mind of the governor calling up, you know, and the red phone is ringing, and it says, "Give John another day," right? Don't inject him, give him another day. Postponement of death sentence. Every day is a day when we must, circle must, carry the vision of God's will into all, underline all, of our activities. Now that's a pretty tall order, right? All we can do is try our best. We're not, we're not perfect. We never will be. Underline the next sentence. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. Next to that, we're going to write 10th step prayer. That's the 10th step prayer. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It is the proper use of the will. And I got to tell you, for the first couple of years of my sobriety, I would fly off the handle quite a bit, until I started to learn how to practice step 10 on a daily basis. And like I say, I'll give you some specific examples of how I do that. Throughout the day, I always ask God for help now. Much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from Him who has all knowledge and power. If we have carefully followed directions, underline followed directions, and next to it write not suggestions. Right? Remember, they put that in there because they had a non-alcoholic psychiatrist said it means just about the same thing, and they got everybody to agree. But if we have carefully followed directions, not suggestions, we have begun to sense the flow of His Spirit into us. To some extent, we have become God conscious. We have begun to develop this vital sixth sense. Underline that last sentence, but we must go further, and that means more action. So basically what they're saying here is they're saying that, the book says that God has all knowledge and power. And it told us earlier that the fundamental idea of God is deep down within all of us. That's telling me that inside of us, we have everything we need to deal with just about any situation we're going to run into. Right? If we can just stay calm and we can listen. All right, I'm going to read a little bit here and then we'll go on to step 11. Step 3, turn our will and our life. That's our thoughts and our actions, right? Asking God to direct our thoughts and our actions. Step 4, it says a business which takes no inventory usually goes broke, right? In living sober, we cannot afford to hold on to useless, harmful attitudes and practices, right? We've got to cut our losses and reduce the pain and harm that we're causing ourselves and others. So they just told us that step 10 is a daily revisiting of steps 4 through 9, right? So it tells us that we now live by a code, right? Love and tolerance of others, that's our code. I lived most of my life with no code. And when I had no code, my life had no meaning. And no matter what I tried to throw into that giant hole in my chest, it was never enough. Never enough. I don't care. A new girlfriend, more booze, different drugs, a new car, a different job, top salesman. It didn't do anything, man. It couldn't do anything. So we continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. And when they crop up, right, we deal with them. So where do they crop up? They crop up in our thoughts and our motives. But more importantly, they crop up in our words and our actions. Right? Our words and our actions. Now, it's much easier to deal with our thoughts and our feelings before they are expressed. So one of the blessings that I learned from this program is to keep my mouth shut. Right? I mean, I really, because when could not keep my mouth shut. If somebody came up and said anything, I had to respond immediately, and I no longer have to do that. If we let others make us angry, right? You make me so angry. Well, they don't do that. If we do that, we give them power to control our lives, right? But remember, people can't make us angry. Anger comes from my own fear, my own anxiety, my own insecurity, and the perceived threats against, remember, the basic instincts. It all comes down to those basic instincts of life. They're threatening my social standing, my self-esteem. They're threatening my security, my money, and they're threatening my sex life, right? And then when I see that, I get angry. Now, when I do make mistakes, I got to immediately correct them by making amends. And even if somebody was really bad to me, because I want to stay sober and I want to stay a little bit serene, I want to try not to react, right? Now, if I do, and we do make mistakes, we do cause harm to other people, we're humans, right? So one of the things in step 10, make amends quickly, we got to watch out for is like a partial apology, right? I shouldn't have done that to you, but you know what you did? You got me going when you did that first, right? Remember, it said we couldn't do that in steps 8 and 9, where we shouldn't do it now. We have to push our pride aside, right, and say, hey, I was wrong, right? I was wrong, just like we did in step 9. Because I want to strengthen my sobriety and my character. Now, if somebody hurts me, I many times I get vindictive, indignant, and angry. I'm experiencing what the book calls spiritual dis-ease. Dis-ease. In the 12 and 12, Bill says, if somebody hurts us and we are sore, just the fact that we're sore and we're reliving that hurt, we're in the wrong also. Remember how that drove us to drink, and hopefully we got rid of that stuff in 4 and 5. If I hang on to a resentment, it must be because I want to have that resentment, right? And I cause harm to myself and others, and I want peace, man. The sooner I can let go of this stuff, the more serenity and the better sobriety that I've got. Some of the things that we get by doing step 10, we can dissolve misunderstandings, right? In the past, if I did something, I would never go to the person, and there would be that unspoken thing between us, and it would be tense all the time. But even if we do something, when we go to that person and we say, hey, you know what, man, I was wrong, man, we're dissolving misunderstandings right after they cropped up. Right after they cropped up. We're going to get rid of the fear that people will discover what we did, right? I'm going to get caught, right? But if we go to them, we say, look, I made a mistake. I did this. I was wrong. We get rid of lots of stress. We get freedom from the guilt and shame. Many of us had to drink because we have a conscience. We would do these things. We would feel guilty and full of shame, and we'd have to drink to turn it off. And then lastly, we're more able to help other people when we do this. A little bit further, we'll talk about morbid reflection. That's when we beat the heck out of ourselves. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So that, step 10, we got with the purpose, we're going to keep growing spiritually. If I'm not moving forward, I'm moving backwards, man. Step 10 on a daily basis is working steps 4 through 9. 4 through 9. Some more stuff here somewhere. Oops. So as a fellowship, guys, we took the steps out of the book with the instructions, and we put them on the wall and on these little cards, but we left the instructions on how to work the steps in the book. So step 10, on the wall, continued to take inventory, and when wrong, promptly admitted it. That, to me, that says, all I got to do is maybe go apologize, right? Well, that's not it at all. And we don't do step 10 at night. We do step 10 during the day. We do step 10 right after something happened, man. This is our walking around in the day step, right? The book says we've entered the world of the Spirit. We've had the spiritual awakening. Our next function is to grow, not to maintain. So if we follow the directions in the book, we're going to be working steps 4 through 9 every day. And there's no way we can do this and stay the same, right? We cannot do this. We're going to grow no matter what if we do it. Now, because I did steps 4 and 5, I've got an inventory sheet in my head, and I've trained myself. That sheet that I had up on the bulletin board and all those sheets, right? That's in my head now. And if I get all screwed up at 8 o'clock in the morning, let's say I get into a big brouhaha with a warehouse guy. Maybe he loaded the wrong tile. We're back there yelling at each other, right? If I get screwed up at 8 o'clock in the morning and I wait until I get home at night, to take care of this, I'm going to be screwed up all day. 9 o'clock, I'm going to blow up at somebody else. 10 o'clock, I'm going to get in another fight with somebody else, right? So if I do that, I've wasted another day in anger, worry, depression, and I don't want to do that. So let's say that something happens and I get into a little fight with somebody, right? So I go over to the corner, right? And remember those sheets, your 4-step sheets. I go, okay, John, who are you mad at? Okay, John, what did they do to you? Okay, John, what part of self is affected? Is it your self-esteem, your security instinct? What did they threaten? Okay, John, what, if anything, did you do to get this thing going? Okay, and then important, I go, well, John, which character defect of yours set this fear or anger into motion? Right, because I can't get upset unless my character defects become activated. Remember, dishonest, selfish, self-centered, frightened, and inconsiderate. Those are the main. From those, all other character defects come. So I can usually spot it right away. And, it's like, okay, God, I don't want to be this way. Please take it away. Right? Please take it away from me. Selfish, self-seeking, fear, whatever it is. I try to discuss it with another person right away. Can't get a hold of my sponsor, I'm at work. I've got other people there that know I'm in the program. Maybe I can pull somebody aside and say, hey, this is going on. I make amends quickly if I've hurt anybody. And so in 10 to 15 minutes, it's gone. Now in the past, I would be carrying that knot in my stomach and my chest all day, and it would come out in my relations with other people. But if I take care of it right away, it's gone, and I essentially get to start my day over. Because I have wasted all the time that I want to waste in resentment, fear, anger, worry, depression, right? I don't have to do that anymore. And I like feeling good. Right? So we continue to do this. We learn more and more about ourselves, about God, about others. This is absolutely a new dimension of living. Now, if I stay angry, fearful, resentful, dishonest, selfish, and depressed, I must want to be that way, and I cannot blame anybody else. I can't blame my boss. I can't blame that customer that went and bought from somebody else. I can't blame mommy and daddy. I gotta blame myself, man. I'll tell you a little story. This was I think it was about 1.5 years ago, and I was in a small group, and there were 3 chronic relapsers in that small group. And there was this old duffer and maybe 3 or 4 other people, and I went first, and I talked about how I was not able to get sober, until a sponsor took me through the book, and I did the work, and I had the spiritual awakening, and the obsession was lifted, right? And I went on a little bit, and then this old duffer went right after me, and he said, I'm going to be the devil's advocate, right? And I knew right then that it was coming, right? I knew the fear started going because I knew he was going to directly contradict what I said. He reached into his pocket and he pulled out a shiny 40-year coin and said, I got 40 years and the only step I ever had to work was step 1, right? And I'm just getting pissed. I mean, it's starting to build. Because, I'm thinking, well, these guys over here, these chronic relapsers, they're going to be in trouble if they listen to this guy. And then it kind of went through, and some other people talked, and they talked about working the steps, but I didn't hear a word anybody said after that guy right there. I didn't hear one thing, right? And my anger was just building up and building up. And but I kept my mouth shut, because I happened to glance up on the wall, and there was the tradition, the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. I saw that, and I said, well, maybe that's his experience. I'm not going to say anything. So one of the guys, I pulled him aside and I said, look, man, you've been relapsing, you really, the answer is to do the work. You've been coming to meetings, all these meetings, going out, and you never got it. And I talked, the other two people left, the chronic relapsers. And I didn't say anything to that guy, but I left and I was angry. Now, about an hour later, I was even angrier. Now, I didn't say anything. I didn't know anybody in the men because I didn't say a gall darn thing. But an hour later, I'm even more angry, and I'm getting as the ticks, the seconds tick. I'm getting angrier and angrier, and. Eric happened to be staying with me, stays with me now and again. He's another recovered alcoholic. And so I went to Eric and I said, I'm going to try to do step 10 here. This guy in small group was killing these people, and I said this and that. And then I said, and I just said this guy, and I talked to Eric about it. And then I said, God, please take it away. Well, an hour later, I was even angrier, right? What is going on? Right? And I said, oh man, and I got out one of those inventory sheets, and who am I mad at? I'm mad at this guy. Why am I mad at him? Oh, not because he's harming. I went to Eric and said he's going to kill these other alcoholics, right? I'm on my high mighty horse. That wasn't it. I was mad because the guy directly contradicted what I said and affected my self-esteem. So all of a sudden I'm looking at that sheet, I go, oh my God. I'm mad because he my social standing in that little group, my self-esteem was affected. That's why I'm angry. I'm not angry because he's killing other alcoholics, right? And so I went back to Eric and I said, well, this is the real reason that I'm mad. Then I got down on my knees and I asked God to take it away. And then I texted somebody or called a sponsee of mine and talked to him for a while, and it was gone. Once I discovered what it was really about, and I followed the instructions, it went away. And I have other examples of dealing with customers too, where the same thing. Once I discovered what it was, and at work, it's usually my selfishness, it's usually my greed. And but you take those little sheets, and if you can do them right away, and you follow the instructions for step 10, and the crap goes away. You don't have to spend all day with that tightness in your chest, man. So these step 10 instructions are absolutely vital. And once I started practicing them on a daily basis, my life got a lot better, man. The funniest thing of all was, when I had that righteous indignation that he was killing other people, but it wasn't that. It was that he affected my self-esteem, right? So I dressed that up as righteous indignation, and once I talked to him and figured it out, it went away. And if I stay mad, right, sometimes I like being mad. If I stay mad, it gives me that comfy feeling of superiority, right? And if I do that, I rationalize and I won't do what I know I should do, or I'll keep doing something that I shouldn't do. But usually, eventually, I'll catch myself and I'll say, okay, John, you knucklehead, let's go through these actions that it tells me to do. So with steps 3 through 10, hopefully have removed enough self-will that we are starting to become somewhat God-conscious and are now receiving some directions, right? Some directions, because where do we get these? Well, we get them from our sponsor, we get them from other people's in the meetings, but we're also starting to get intuitive thoughts, and usually, we're not sure about those, and we can talk to other people and see what they're about. But again, the book says God has all knowledge and power. The book says God dwells within us. So that means within ourselves we have all the knowledge and power to handle just about anything that comes up. And that's the sixth sense that Bill talks about twice in the book. And you can call it the sixth sense, you can call it the soul, innate intelligence, the conscience, the little voice, you can call it whatever. That same little voice, when we were active alcoholics, used to make us do all kinds of things that would get us into trouble, but now we're starting to hear that voice, and it's actually starting to be, to help us out. All right, I think we'll go back to the book. Oh, I guess I'll just tell you, I'll just read these real quick. These are 9 questions. I got it out of one of the pamphlets. You don't have to write it down. But it's 9 questions to help you work step 10. But I believe step 10, you really just have to be able to do it real quick in your head. How may I have harmed myself or someone else today? Which of my character defects caused me to do these harmful things? How was I resentful, selfish, dishonest, resentful, or fearful? Did I ask my higher power to remove my selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear as soon as I was aware of them? What is left for my higher power to remove? Did I admit my mistakes promptly and make amends? What do I still need to take care of? How often during the day was I feeling gratitude, and how often was I feeling self-pity? What good did I do today? It's important that we look and see that we do good things as well. And a lot of people say when they do a 4th and 5th step that they list their good stuff, and that's okay. I think that's just fine. But me personally, my assets weren't the ones that got me drunk. It was my liabilities that kept me drunk. How was I loving and compassionate? Who did I help today, and how? So, some more for step 10 stuff. And then I'm going to read this little letter. Bill wrote this letter. Bill Wilson. And I'm not exactly sure. Bill was 26 years sober. And there was a group in Chicago. There was an AA group. And I've been trying to find the letter that the AA group wrote to Bill. But they wrote Bill a letter taking his inventory. They said, you're this and you're that and you're doing this and you're doing that. You ought to be ashamed of yourself, Bill Wilson. And they read him the riot act in this letter. And I'm going to read the letter that Bill wrote back to this group. He was 26 years sober. This happened in 1960. That you seemed disillusioned with me personally may be a new and painful experience for you, but many members have had that experience with me. I love that. Most of their pain has been caused not only by my several shortcomings, but by their own insistence on placing me, a drunk, trying to get along with other folks upon a completely illusory pedestal, a station which no fallible person could possibly occupy. I'm sure that you will understand that I have never held myself out to anybody as either a saint or a superman. I have repeatedly and truthfully said that AA is full of people who have made more spiritual progress than I ever or can make. That in some areas of living I have made some decided gains, but in others I seem to have stood still. And in still other ways I may have gone backwards. I am sorry that you are disillusioned with me, but I am happy that even I have found a life here. I just love that letter that he wrote him back, right? That you may be disillusioned with me personally may be new and painful for you, but many other people have had that experience with me. I love that.